What's up, babe, and everybody else, and welcome back to the Founder Academy. I am Mark, the FUD founder, and it is Friday. It is Team of the Year day. So, one of my favorite days of the year, besides maybe Team of the Season starting, but Team of the Year. The only challenge with Team of the Year, guys, is that they release it, they draw it out, so now it's actually 2 weeks. So I think it's going to be attackers today that are coming out on Friday. So you're going to see Messi, Mbappe, and Benzema. So a really interesting Team of the Year this year. It's like the first year that we haven't had both Ronaldo and Messi. Last year, Ronaldo was kind of fringe. I think he was the 12th man or something like that. But Messi's still very much a part of it. I would love to get that Messi. I think he's probably going to settle in at about 3.5, and then he'll probably come down to about 2.5 or just under 3, probably about 2.5. So you need a lot of coins. I don't have that many coins. I might be able to sell everything and try to get them, which is, you know what, I'm pretty spontaneous with those types of decisions. So it could be something that we do. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I don't want to get into coin balances and stuff like that, but, you know, we might be able to get close to 2 if we get rid of everything, if we kind of play our cards right and stuff like that. But I do have a lot of packs saved up. I've got not a ton. I've got some good stuff. I got 83 by 10s and a couple things like that. So I've been doing like the SBCs. There's a bunch of stuff coming out. Apparently there is a Player of the Month Mbappe that's going to be coming out, as well as his Team of the Year Mbappe. There is going to be a flashback Sergio Ramos. So EA obviously want a coin sink. So investing in high rated players like fodder, like Tony Cruz, like I did last year, that would be a really good investment for people that are looking just to invest. It's a little bit late right now, but if you do want to try to get some last second flips going on, that would be probably something that you could look into. So what you guys are seeing is basically my run through division rivals. I just wanted to get about 8 games out of the way. We end up taking our first loss, which you guys will see. It was a really interesting game. But I'll explain kind of what happened with that. We did the Martin Odegaard SBC at the start of the video. I used him for a couple games. He's not going to be a card that's going to last very long, but I just thought it was kind of cool. Martin Odegaard's an interesting story. Like, he was one of those guys that kind of was one of the wonder kids, I guess, when he was at Real Madrid's youth academy. There was a couple guys that were kind of in that category. Hashim Mastor was one of them. I don't know what ended up happening with him. Alan Halilovic, a bunch of these guys that like people just like thought, okay, they're really young, they're going to be awesome when they get older, and they never really panned out. Odegaard kind of floated around for a little bit, but looks like he kind of found his way at Arsenal. He was supposed to be this like Messi-esque type figure to a certain degree because people had such high hopes for him. I don't think that's really what his ceiling is. I think, but he's found his kind of niche in terms of being a passer, creative playmaker in that midfield. So I'm really happy to see him. So it was a card that was kind of emotional for me because I was really happy to. I like those wonder kids and kind of seeing them develop. So I was happy to see him kind of find his own, and then to get Player of the Month for Arsenal, I think was kind of cool. I'm not a huge Arsenal fan by any means. I actually have no real problem with Arsenal personally, but a lot of my friends that are Arsenal fans, they hate United, so it kind of draws me into being, like, I guess a bit of an Arsenal hater. But to be honest with you, I don't really like despise Arsenal as much as I despise, like, let's say a Liverpool or Man City. Like, I don't like either of those clubs, so I'd rather see Arsenal win the Premier League than either of those two. But I digress. That's not super important. You guys aren't here for that. We've got a bunch of topics that I want to talk about, but there was 2 comments on the last video, and as you guys know, that I like to address any questions or comments that you guys have in any of the previous videos. So I appreciate you guys commenting. Comment down below. I'll try to address anything that you guys put in there. So the first one was from, I hope I don't butcher your name here, His Cranson or Transon, Cransen, Transon, His Cranson. I don't know how to say your name, so please correct me if I'm wrong. His Cranson or Transon. So he asks, is there a difference between the 4-4-1-1 with the CF, so the center forward, and the cam? I feel the one with the cam is better because cams usually have better passing stats than center forwards or strikers. So a couple things to unpack there. One, I actually don't play in a 4-4-1-1, so it's kind of a moot point for me. It's a little bit of an interesting formation because it lays the midfielders flat. So for me, one of the reasons that I use that is just, well, the only reason I use that is just because I have it for chemistry purposes at the start of the game. But I switched to a 4-2-3-1. And the reason I do that is because I like to have my players offset. I don't like having them in a row. EA are notorious for like 4-4-2s and 4-4-1-1s. They have the players very flat. So the reason that that's important is when you're coming back on defense, they default into a position. So if you have a flat defensive line and a flat midfield line, they literally sit in a row, and players on the opposing team will kind of find these little soft spots between the midfield and D, and it creates really easy passing lanes. So I like the 4-2-3-1 because it kind of offsets players, and it kind of it forces them into positions where they're covering a lot of the field. I don't like any formation where it's very flat. Excuse me. So that's why I don't like 4-4-1-1s, just because the way EA programmed the game, they didn't really take that into account, and the players just sit like this. So it creates a huge gap in between those two lines, the midfield line and the defensive line. So I do not recommend 4-4-1-1. You can try it, but I think there's better formations out there. I would prefer the 4-1-2-1-2 with the two wingers. It's going to leave the midfield a little bit open, but at least it offsets the cam and the CDM, and it gives you triangles to play. Which is another thing. It's not even defensively. Offensively, when you get the ball, your players are all sitting in a straight line. So if you've got midfielders that are all flat, if you've got your opponents that are kind of breaking up those passing lanes, they're not creating angles for you. They're all in a straight line. So just something to take into account when you're picking formations. I don't necessarily disagree with using it to create the chemistry, but once you're in game, I recommend something that's a little bit more offset, so the players are a little bit more spread out around the field, and gives them a little bit of depth on the team. But to answer your question, in terms of the center forward and the cam, I think it depends on the player. Like, I'm not really sure in terms of like your question. Of course, the center forwards and strikers are not going to have passing stats because they're not really made for that. The center forwards are always going to, like, a player that's defaulted to a center forward is basically a striker that drops a little bit. But if you actually do use that formation, they're really the same thing. It's just what players you're going to use, because the cams are midfielders, right? So like, you take a guy like Clarence Eto'o, for example. He's not really a center forward. He's a cam that can move into the center mid. But if you had a center forward, their secondary position is probably going to be a striker like Erling Haaland. So if you took those two players, they're very different, right? Seedorf's going to be a pass first guy. Haaland's going to be a goal scorer. He's going to be okay passing in the box for like simple short stuff, but I wouldn't have him in the midfield because his long passing is not going to be that great. So depends on what you're kind of looking to get out of there. If you want a cam, if you want someone who's playing in a 4-4-1-1, you want those the center midfielders to be holding guys, and then that the player in behind the striker to be more of a passing player, I would use a cam. But again, I would use a 4-2-3-1. I wouldn't use a 4-4-1-1 just because it's, like I said before, it just creates it very flat. So I don't know if that addresses your comment, but hopefully that does. If you have any other questions, let me know. And then the other question that we had was from FPL Bailey, who said, "Dang, where you been, man?" And that's a really good question. So as you guys can see here, we moved into a new house. So I moved across the country a couple times. I'm originally from Vancouver, hence my shirt. Moved across the country. So I lived in Vancouver way back in the day when I worked for EA, like years and years and years ago. Lived there for about 10 more years after that. And then I ended up taking jobs out in the East Coast, because in Canada, Toronto is really where most of the jobs are if you're going to work in marketing or anything to do with like sports marketing or anything like that. So I ended up moving out east in order to for career opportunities. I ended up working for like Maple Leaf Sports and stuff like that for the Raptors. So I worked out there, and then I ended up kind of doing a career shift where I made a move back out west, and I was getting into a little bit more finance and a little bit more stable industry because it wasn't being affected by COVID as much. So I needed something that was a little bit more recession proof. And then again, ended up doing another career change where I ended up getting a job with the federal government. So that actually ended up moving me back out west. So I'm back in the Ontario area. So I'm living out kind of in the Greater Toronto area, just on the outskirts of it. And I'm working with the federal government of Canada. So a very, very different career path, I guess, I've had, but it's caused me to move across the country a couple times. So anyway, to answer your question, where have I been? I've been dealing with that. So there's a lot going on. Obviously, myself and my partner, Foot Babe, who you guys have seen in previous videos, my beautiful, lovely girlfriend, she and I are living together out here. Her son lives with us, so we have a very full house here. And then we also picked up Kane, the little menace, the boxer lab that we got, who is a real handful. So my job is very, very time consuming. I do a lot of work. They're very long shifts. They're 12-hour days minimum. Well, 10-hour days minimum, but very likely that you'll do 12 or 13. It's just because my job is very demanding. So when I'm at work, I have like a 5 on 4 off type of schedule. So when I'm working those 5 days, it's very hard for me to get online. I might be able to sneak out an hour, but for me to sit here and like cut up a video, it's just going to be very difficult, which is why in the last video I said I'm probably not going to be able to make like very I've never been a full-time guy, but like at the same time I'm not going to be able to probably pump out videos even at the rate that I was able to like in the previous year before I kind of had to go to training and stuff like that. I was getting in a real flow and I was enjoying pumping these out. So they're going to be more kind of every couple of weeks I'll try to put out more of a state of the union and kind of show you where my team is at, my club is at, and show a little bit of the gameplay and kind of how my team's evolving. I'll try to make it concise so you guys can see. But anything I do online in terms of like online gameplay, I try to record and then I put it into a video like this. So it'll be very much like just kind of talking about. I'm not doing like daily. Here's what the daily content is. It's more like here's what's been going on the last couple of weeks. So that's why I have like a couple notes that I made when I'm just like here's kind of some of the stuff that I wanted to address with the video. But that's kind of where life is taking us, taking myself as well. Just a lot of changes going on, but you know what, I'm getting older, so you know life changes as you get older, right? So I sound like an old man yelling at clouds here, but that's basically what's been going on. It's just been really busy, great changes. You know, I'm really happy that Foot Babe and I have been able to finally move in, just because we've had to do long distance for so long, and she's come out to BC a lot, I've come out to Ontario, but for us to be back in the same province has been really nice. So anyway, you guys are not all here for that. You don't want to hear about my life. You know, I can talk about that stuff as much as you want, but for the most part, you guys are here for FIFA stuff. So what you guys are seeing, a lot of gameplay, right? So we went through the divisions. The divisions, just like I said, are getting a little bit more difficult. My team is starting to get to that point where I'm glad Team of the Year is out because I need a couple difference makers. My team is good, but they're not fantastic. The guy that I've been holding out for is Prime Faring Puskas. I was going to pick up his baby, and then I was thinking maybe I'll pick up his mid, and then his price of his Prime started to drop, and I started to sell a few other things, and I was getting really close. So now I'm just waiting for him to drop a little bit. But during Team of the Year, because there's so many cool cards that are out, I have a feeling that based on what they release today and over the next week or two, I might have to pivot again and see where it goes. They're releasing icon like Team of the Year icons. Like they've been playing around with icons a lot, which is nice because over the last couple of years they've been pretty static, right? Like even the moments have been pretty similar every single year. And you guys know I'm not a huge fan of the moments just because I don't like the fact that like the body type of the player that they're using is based on the original moment. So I'll give you an example. The Ronaldo, even though they'll use a picture or it's the moment of, let's say him in 98, they have that Ronaldo, the mid Ronaldo that's got the little thing on the front, the little hair. They used a Ruud Gullit from his original Moments card, had the Ruud Gullit where he was clean shaven, had the shorter dreadlocks. And then all his moments that come out, he's got the mustache and the longer dreadlocks, and it's using the body type from the basically the base version. So it's small things like that. I know that's not really super important, but that stuff drives me crazy just because it doesn't really match up, right? You might as well be using a totally different player, just because the body in game doesn't match the actual card that's out there and the moment that they're trying to reflect. So I've not really been a huge fan of the moments. Puskas, I would love to get his moments version just because he's only got the one body type, so I think that one's okay. But some of the other ones, it's just enough to deter me from wanting to use them. I know that's really silly for some people, but I just don't want to use those. So I think it's kind of cool that they released like the World Cup icons, and now they're going to be doing these Team of the Year icons, whatever those look like, but they look like they're super, super, super jacked up. One of them that I'm really interested in is Gerd Muller. The nice thing too is like I even want the prime Gerd Muller, because Gerd Muller in this game, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the clips that are going on, but he is phenomenal. His goal scoring is just, he's on another level. He's just a goal scoring machine. He reminds me of like a slightly quicker Benzema. Like, you get the ball on his foot and he just puts it in the net. So I've really, really liked using him. The only challenge with him is now that I'm getting a little bit higher up in the divisions, guys have pacier center backs, and he doesn't have that breakaway speed that like an Mbappe would. So if you get a step on a guy, he can't accelerate into space that quickly, even with a Hunter on him. He's okay speed-wise, but he's more of a in-the-box type finisher. So if you can get a version of him that has like really, really high acceleration, or even usable, like 90 plus acceleration, 90 plus sprint speed, he will be phenomenal. He would be a really good card, so I'd like to get him. I just want to take a break, actually, and this is the game that I wanted to talk about. So I've been rolling through the divisions. I know people are probably going to think I'm making excuses here, and look, there probably is a little bit of that, but the mistake I made with this, it was I changed up the team. So you guys know from my expert opinion, I guess I would say, like I use that very tongue-in-cheek, but this game has morale in it, right? So it's been in there for years and years and years. So when you use too many new cards, there's too many cards that have low morale, and that's what happened in this game. This was my mistake. I used too many new cards. I just basically built a new team in the middle of this run, because it was between a couple days, I think, that I played all these games. And I used a brand new team, and the problem with him was this guy was good enough that I couldn't. It was the difference maker. If you guys see, like, just watch the way the players are running. They're moving around and they're doing what I call circling. So they're swinging. So they swing around the players. They don't come in front of them and lock into tackles. They swing around the back. So when I would go into a tackle, the player would kind of stutter a little bit, and then he would run towards the back of the player. Instead of running in the front of him, he would run towards the back, or he would swing around. So that way the player gets a step, your player swings around the back, and now you're having to kind of come from behind, either pull him and he'll break away, or you're going to have to foul him. Like, it just puts you on a bad angle, so it's tougher to defend. So that stuff was happening all game with this guy. And again, no offense to this guy, I'm not taking anything away from him, but it was my mistake, because it was a very 50-50 game, very winnable, actually, when I say that. Like, it was a game that I probably could have pulled out a result, but I made that mistake of having way too many new cards in it. They were all on, like, what I would assume is 80 morale, because you got them all new, and they all default to 80. So they were just not playing well. Their physicals were just falling through the floor, and I was able to pull 2 goals back, but I essentially was 3 goals down by the time I went ultra attacking and essentially put this guy under pressure, and he kind of cracked under the pressure, and he allowed a couple goals. But I give him a lot of credit. He was smart enough to essentially just play the game the way you need to when someone's playing on full pressure. Simple ground passes, cut inside, and then cut forward. And he was able to try to essentially come out on counters. Again, this is another guy, same thing. I just made that mistake of just getting frustrated and going straight into a game. And again, you can see the center backs. They're not locking in. There's 4 or 5 of them. They're all just kind of running side by side. Like, their aggression goes through the floor. Their tackling goes through the floor. So a guy can just walk forward, and all your players are just kind of walking side by side, bouncing off of them, swinging around them. They're not locking in. And it took a lot of patience for me to break this down, because this guy, and no offense to this player right here, but he wasn't as good as the last guy. I was fortunate enough that even though my players were, they were falling, they were ragdolling, they were coming into tackles, and they were getting displaced, as I showed you guys in the last video. If you don't know what displacement is, watch the last video. It basically explains it. It's essentially whenever you go into a physical tackle, your player will stumble. Excuse me. Oh, I got somebody in my throat there. They'll come into a physical tackle, and they'll stumble and they'll fall. They basically displace your player out of position, so your opponent can attack without somebody on their back, and now your player's about 2 or 3 feet behind. So that was happening a ton. Even here, you'll see it at the very end. Watch the player just kind of stumble there. At the very end, he gets knocked, and then Zambrata just kind of stumbles after. So it's all those animations. That type of stuff happened all game long, but again, I was able to just keep the ball on the ground. This guy was pulling players out of position, and I literally just kept the ball simple passes, didn't use sprint a lot, and just worked it into the middle of the field and just potted 3 goals. And then that last one, by then I had held so much possession that all the in-game sliders had swung up so far in my favor that when I took that shot, it bounced right down to Garincha, and I ended up scoring the goal. So again, that's just experience from my part, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but it is. That all comes with experience. You understand how the game plays. When your team is playing really poorly, you just have to keep the ball on the ground. Don't sprint, don't rush the ball forward. Just keep it simple X passes and just hold a lot of possession, because all the sliders will slowly start to move in your favor. Sliders, shots on goal, goals scored are huge boosts, but it's basically the dynamic difficulty in the game changing. As you hold more possession, it basically says like this player's better, so the sliders start to move in your favor and bounces start to go your way. But when you're on really low morale, it's very, very hard to overcome that. So it was just tough because I kept going into games out of frustration from the last one, and I was jumping into them. So it was really dumb on my part, but look, I'm in a lower enough division that I could get away with it this time. If you're in higher divisions, though, you can't do that, guys. If you take a loss, especially if you take 2 losses in a row, you have to go offline, or you have to play in a simpler game mode, and you have to beat up on someone or beat up on the computer, because if you just keep going into games, they're just going to get worse and worse and worse, and you're going to get frustrated because your team you're essentially playing with a handicap, right? Your team's going to get moraled, and you're not going to be able to. They're unplayable. I was hoping that it was going to be gone in this game, but look, it's not gone. It's in FIFA 23, just like it was in FIFA 22 and 21 and 20 and 19. It's been in because they're using the same game code. I'm hoping that they rewrite the game for the new EA Sports Football or whatever they're calling it for next year, because this game does need a complete rewrite. They're not using the same programmers that they did 10 years ago when they originally built this code or whenever it was. And it needs to be rewritten because there's so much old coding and old garbage in there that is causing this game to just be problematic, right? It's still a fun game, but at the same time, it's got a lot of old code that they can't get rid of, and they obviously can't change it because I guess it will just break the game too much, and it will create major bugs for them. So I'm just praying that they rewrite it, but I'm not going to hold my breath, because knowing EA, it's very unlikely that they're going to put those types of resources towards rewriting the entire game. It would put them back, and I think right now they're on the front foot and they want to see how the next game's going to go because they're losing the FIFA license. So I would be surprised, unless they've had a team working on this for a couple of years on completely rewriting the game. Don't expect this the game code to be rewritten at all, because I think this is just still too much of a moneymaker for them to take that risk. Anyway, a couple of small little things I want to get into. One, freezing. This I don't know if you guys have had this a lot, but I've never had the game freeze, but it freezes a ton in the menus. I'll be going into a game mode, I'll be going into like a team management screen or something like that, and it's just freezing. I'm like putting players in to like do an SBC or something like that, and it will just not load the player select screen. It will just essentially sit there and hang, and then at the bottom it will have that little field that looks like a loading screen, and it just will stay black until I have to reset the game, and it's happening a lot. So that might just be me, but I've never had connectivity issues or anything like that. I've always been very fortunate with like, the odd game here and there I'll get matched up with somebody from like Costa Rica or like South Mexico or something like that, and you'll eventually get like some really poor connections. But for the most part, in Canada here, the connectivity is pretty good because there's so many players out here. So I don't really have that. It's not like it's an internet issue. It's just the game. The game is freezing itself because it's programmed weirdly in the menus. Chips. I find it very bizarre that every single person in the world can do chips. Doesn't matter how good or bad their shooting is. Everyone seems to be fantastic at chipping. It's like crossing. Like when you're switching the play, it doesn't matter how good or bad your long passing is. Like guys just switch the play absolutely perfectly. They do like 50 footballs across the field and it lands perfectly to people's feet. It's really bizarre. I don't know what I wrote there. Offlines. Tramp goals. I seem to be consuming a lot of tramp goals this year. I had some notes, but I don't remember what I wrote here. Tramp goals. If you guys watch a lot of the games that I'm playing, tramp goals are just absolutely awful this year because the middle of the field is really clogged. So guys are just running down the sideline and tramping goals in. So it's something I need to watch for. As you guys can see here, like look at the amount of players that you have to bypass in order to score a goal. It's no wonder people walk down the side. I'm hoping EA address that because walking down the sideline, the defenders don't seem to track runs properly. When you're going through the middle, they track properly, but all you have to do is go down the sideline and literally cut the ball across, and players just seem to lose their mind. They don't track runs properly. It's really bizarre. And then one of the things that's been a huge issue for me this year has been the content. Like normally I praise EA, especially over the last couple of years for like the content, and I don't think the content's been bad, but certain promotions, they've just been recycling content. Like the Centurions, it's almost identical to the FUT Heroes. Like literally, they picked the same players: the Seamus Colemans, the Neymars. I don't know if Neymar was in Heroes, but like I would say at least 50% of the players that were in FUT Heroes are in Centurions. It's like they just changed the card design. I don't know why they're doing that, because there's a ton of cards that like have not gotten special cards over the last 2 or 3 years, and they have not released anything new, but they're just regurgitating the same players. I don't know why they're doing that, but it's very frustrating. Even the icons like Kaká, his prime icon was, they released that last year. They did the exact same card around the exact same time. I don't know what they're doing, but I don't know if it's just laziness because they've dedicated a team towards next year and like in terms of the content team for this year. But this calendar it's painful. It's like they literally took an Excel doc and then they just changed the year and then they changed some of the other stuff, but they kept like at least 50% of the content from last year. They just didn't change the schedule at all. It's very, very lazy. And it's odd because it's very unlike them to just be that lazy. They normally do a pretty good job with the promos, but I swear to God, these promos are the same as they were last year. I don't know what they're doing, but it's really annoying. But that is going to be the end of this video, guys. I look forward to Team of the Year. I hope everybody has good luck with all their packs. We'll release a video in the next couple days because I'm sure there's going to be a ton of content, but I just wanted to get something out there so you guys have something. Good luck this week, guys, with all your content, all your packs. Let me know what you guys got down below, and until next time, take care. Peace.